These are our life's aha moments from the perspective and experiences of two Christian women who are focused on creating a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ.
Join us as we share and discuss insights we have learned and provide tools to empower you on your journey of intentional creation. Welcome to another episode of Aha's Awakenings and Applications. I am Leann.
I am Melissa.
Thank you for choosing to share some time with us today. We are grateful for your support. We would like to ask you to help us expand the reach of our podcast by subscribing, following, and sharing it with others. Today, we have chosen the topic of peacekeeping versus peacemaking. And I really have appreciated studying these two words. I have never really given them a thought as side-by-side thought. I don't think of them as the same thing, but I've never taken the time to really learn much about them. And so this has been just a really fun study for me. I've enjoyed it. And so I wanted to just start by talking about what peacekeeping is and is not, and what peacemaking is and is not. And so we hear often in conference talks about being a peacemaker and choosing to practice peacemaking. And so I think this just kind of expands that knowledge a little bit better so that it helps me to zero in on what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. So peacemaking is not peacekeeping. And I want to quote this from the Gospel Coalition website, and it says, "They are not the same thing. We prefer peacekeeping to avoid arguments because we assume conflict is undesirable, unpredictable, and uncomfortable, something shameful or even sinful. Peace does not assume the absence of conflict. Unity," I'm going to change the wording a little bit, "can come from making peace out of conflict." And so I found that really interesting. What caught my attention was that that word conflict, because we've talked about conflict and communication in the past. And we live in such a contentious world that I've come to the realization that we need to be actively pursuing being peacemakers. It's going to take a lot of action. We can't be passive and wait for peacemaking to happen. It's something that we have to really participate in, especially as disciples of Jesus Christ. We have covenanted to be peacemakers.
Yeah.
And so I love thinking about that. So we know that it's going to take communication and compromise. And really just that seeking to understand, which we've talked about in so many different ways, seeking to understand others, what their needs are, what their desires are, and then coming to that mutual understanding and that mutual agreement and being able to move forward with that.
What I thought was really interesting as I was studying today, I was looking at just different general conference talks. And there's been many over the years, here and there, but starting with 2018, there has been a conference talk in almost every single conference since 2018. Yeah. And I just thought that was really interesting, especially the last 3 years.
Yes.
And President Nelson gave that talk, Peacemaker is Needed, in 2023. And it's been quoted several times, but it's just so interesting that other apostles have given talks on it as well. And it's been the main source of the talk, not just a little piece here and there, but it's so interesting how, just seeing in our world today what's going on and what is needed.
Yeah, as we see that contention increase, we need that direction so we can know what to do and handle it. As I was thinking about the experiences I've had, where maybe I've had some conflict with other people and how that I handled that and maybe that person handled that, I've recognized that, yeah, I could do so much better. Like, even though I've tried my best, I've noticed that it hasn't always turned out the way I wanted. Like, and I do
Mm-hmm.
think this is something that we've talked about recently, but you know, I've been thinking about what if we do all of these things and we still don't reach that common ground? And we see so many people just walk away from relationships. And I just think that as we study, we can, figure this out. We may not be able to keep every relationship, but we can do our best to have that Christ-like
Mm-hmm.
love and charity in our hearts, even if it doesn't turn out the way that we hope it does.
Yeah, I was on a site this morning, and it was talking about that peace is not always possible because it takes two people to reconcile, but God only holds you accountable for your side. So,
Yes, right? Because we're not responsible for other
right.
people's. One thing that I was reading about, it was in a conference talk, I believe it was Elder Stevens' talk. He was talking about the Reverend Amos C. Brown. And I don't know if you remember reading that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a national civil rights leader, and he's also a pastor of the Third Baptist Church in San Francisco. And he was talking about how he had read this article that wasn't very favorable about the church, our church, and how he spoke up and stood up for the church, saying, that even though he didn't agree with everything, um, he still valued what we had to say. And one of the things that he said was, peacemakers are not passive, they are persuasive in the Savior's way. And I
Mm-hmm.
just really love that thought, thinking about how are we persuading those around us in a way that is, I think I read something about the pattern in the Savior's pattern. And so that, that long suffering or gentleness and kindness, meekness, and love unfeigned, that is the pattern that he has set for us to follow.
Mm-hmm. I love how the difference between peacemaking and peacekeeper. I was looking at this website this morning. It's called Pens and Wrenches, but it's an interesting name for a website. But I thought it was they had like this little um, graphic that had like peacekeeper on one side and peacemaker on the other side, and just
Uh-huh.
kind of like the different things about each of them. And I thought it was really great to be able to see them side by side
Mm,
and saying that peacekeepers often avoid conflict, seeks temporary harmony, may compromise truth, and maintains the status quo, which I think is good in some situations, but not always. And I'm thinking, I
mhm.
think that's where I've been
Yeah,
in
I
many
think that's easy.
cases.
And what makes me see that is, that wanting to avoid the conflict, right? Because not
Hmm.
looking at conflict as something that we can come to an agreement with.
Right. Um, and peacemakers engage conflict with wisdom, seeks true reconciliation, speaks truth in love, and works towards real peace.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah, so
love
those
that.
motives and those
Yes.
intentions are really important, right? I think that
Yeah.
just makes me think that the next time that I feel like I'm in a confrontation or a conflict with somebody, what are my motives? Am I, seeking to be that peacemaker? Or because I feel like there's often we see so much people trying to stir the pot, I guess. I've seen
Hmm.
that on social media, where I recently had a friend post something, and there was one person that was just trying to instigate some contention there and kept
Hmm.
repeatedly making, and I think we see that a lot. And so we can stop and think about what are our motives as we, seek to be peacemakers. And even President Nelson had said, cannot boundary lines exist without becoming battle lines?
Mm.
And so there is a huge difference between a boundary line and a battle line.
Yes.
And um, boundary lines don't have to be a battle line. They
Mhm.
are just standing up for what we know to be true and doing that in a kind way.
Yeah. I I went to this, I found this primary. it was an article from the Friend magazine. I just thought it was so great how it just simply kind of put it all in, very simple terms. And it says 5 ways to be a peacemaker. So the first one is listen even when you don't agree. So all these
Mhm.
things that we've been talking about for several weeks, to try to understand how others feel. 3, practice problem solving. 4, choose patience. And 5, remember Jesus Christ.
Isn't
It
that so
just kind of
great? It's
just
like
puts
how
it all
simple can
succinctly.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and remembering that being a peacemaker is a Christ-like attribute, so we can seek
Hmm.
for that more fully in our lives as we
Hmm.
work with other people. But I love that list. I think that is something that we all need to pay attention to.
I listened to a talk or read a talk by Neil L. Anderson, called "Following Jesus: Being a Peacemaker." And he said peacemakers are not passive; they are persuasive in the Savior's way, which I think we've kind of talked about a little bit. But I loved how he kind of talked about. He said we have a shield of faith, and those fiery darts, those things, those people that are trying to keep, cause that contention, that we can have that shield of faith. And he said, how does a peacemaker calm and cool the fiery darts? Certainly not by shrinking before those who disparage us. Rather, we remain confident in our faith, sharing our beliefs with a conviction, but always void of anger or malice.
And that's not always easy to do, but I do believe
Mm-mm.
that as we stand firm and not step into that contention, sometimes I have been on the receiving end of um, those disparaging remarks, and I felt at times like I wanted to step into that arena, but there's been so many times like, no, I don't really want to. There's a
Mm-hmm.
part of me that does, but a part of me that doesn't. And I'm so glad that I didn't, that I've just stayed outside of that and let that be where that person is. I don't have to be a part of that. And I think that's something that I have learned over the years because maybe in the past, I think there have been times when I've stepped in and, I'm going to stand up for myself, but it was more of a fighting back or
Mm-hmm.
proving them wrong or whatever, right? And I think we can still stand our ground when we stay outside of that arena.
Right.
And I really love what Elder Stevenson talked about in his last conference address. He said that today peacemaking still begins in the most basic place in our hearts, then in
Mm-hmm.
homes and families. As we practice there, peacemaking will spread into our neighborhoods and communities. So really we can begin practicing right in our hearts and in our homes with our families. And sometimes those are the most challenging relationships because we do spend so
Yeah.
much time with each other. Sometimes we have expectations of each other.
Hmm.
And so we can just remember that it begins in our hearts first. And that
Hmm.
desire, everything starts with a desire.
Right.
And I have that desire to be that peacemaker in a world that can feel super challenging at times, super
Hmm.
contentious over the most unimportant things sometimes. And sometimes
Right.
those things are really important. And I think being able to distinguish, is this important? Is this something that I need to um, have a boundary and
Hmm.
be, step up and speak? Or is being that peacemaker, holding back from commenting? Sometimes the Savior didn't speak.
Yeah.
He just let people say what they said. And so we can, really being able to discern with the Spirit
Hmm.
what direction to go.
Yeah. I went back to a talk by Franklin D. Richards called Be a Peacemaker, and this was in 1993. And I thought it was interesting. So I guess he shares a story of a bishop who brought several of the youth from his ward into his office, and he talked to them and asked them to intentionally be a peacemaker for, I think it was a month. So to be really intentional. And then he came back and he talked to each of those youth after that month and asked what happened. And it was so interesting to see the differences. that their families had had in that month. And one of the young men had said that their house was so much more peaceful. And he said, I realized that I probably was a lot of the the instigator of the contention before. But
Yeah.
one of the young women said, I love this. She says, I've tried hard to be a good example and a peacemaker, and I feel better about myself than I have ever felt. A wonderful feeling of peace has come over me.
Mm.
And I love that because, just that 1 month of focusing on it changed who she felt she was and how she experienced life. And she also said it changed their house, their home as well. But,
Yeah.
if we are intentionally seeking that peace in our homes.
Yeah. And that effort that we're putting forth is also
Mhm.
helping us to have that peace in our heart.
Yeah.
And I think, isn't that the most important of all? And how, if we are not being a peacemaker, how that does affect our hearts, and then it affects all
Mhm.
of those around us. So really paying attention to our hearts. Where is my heart at?
Yeah. It all really comes back to love.
It does, that charity.
That charity. And
Yeah.
President Nelson in his talk, he talks a lot about that. He says, brothers and sisters, the pure love of Christ is the answer to the contentions that ail us today. Charity propels us to bear one another's burdens rather than heap burdens upon each other. The pure love of Christ always allows us to stand as witnesses of God at all times and in all things, especially in tense situations. Charity allows us to demonstrate how men and women of Christ speak and act, especially when under fire.
Mm, I really like that. And
Mm-hmm.
what stood out to me is, heaping burdens upon others. What am I giving to others?
Yeah.
Am I lifting those burdens or am I adding to them? I think that makes me think about my actions and how I am responding to the world
Mhm.
and what I'm just putting out there. And instead of always being reactive, can we be the one that can jump up and be proactive, proactively being a peacemaker?
Right.
Looking for who needs my help or who needs my love today? Who can I whose burdens can I lighten? We hear that a lot.
Hmm.
And that's really just another way of taking those steps to be that peacemaker.
Yeah. I think another thing that really stood out to me as I was reading and studying for this was how big forgiveness is a part of this as well. I mean, you
It's
wouldn't think of that
huge.
right off the bat, but it is huge.
It's a huge part of that.
Hmm.
Not only forgiving the other person, but maybe even forgiving yourself,
Oh, yeah.
for any mistakes that you have made along the way.
Hmm. Because we're going to make mistakes.
Yep.
It's okay.
And we're practicing. I love that thought of,
Yeah.
practicing in your home with your family and
Mhm.
friends and then to your community. Because that's really what life is all about, is taking that time to practice these virtues and
Right.
these things that our Savior has asked us to do.
And I think it was President Nelson also that talked about we can literally change the world one person and one interaction at a time. So it's taking the, practicing in our homes and then taking that out into our workplaces, into the community, and the things that we're doing that can help model that peacemaking.
Mm. I remember years ago, there was a woman that I knew that um, we didn't seem to click very well. And in my heart, I just had this feeling like I need to get to know her better. I don't know her well enough to really understand um, where she's coming from. And as I made that effort to get to know her better, we did come to become friends. It took a little bit of time, um, and it wasn't exactly easy, but getting to
Mhm.
know who she was and what her background was and just some of the struggles that she had, it made me have so much more compassion for her. And so I think that, when next time we are in a situation where we see maybe some conflict or feel like maybe someone has been unkind to us, we can stop and think about, well, this person must have some big burdens that they're carrying right now. And
Mhm.
that's usually true, right? Everybody's got burdens that they carry. We all carry them differently. But instead of looking at that as a personal attack, being able to just say, you know, this person needs my prayers, they need love, and, maybe just paying attention to how you can give that, or if they're open to receiving that. And if not, that's okay too. We can still give it. Um,
Mhm.
and be able to move forward without taking that personally and letting that stop us from being and doing the good that we know we can do.
Yeah. Somewhere I read this morning it talked about the patience is also a part of this, having patience with people.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I've had some experience with this topic more than I know. I feel like I can really relate to all of that.
Mhm. Well, there was an experience that was shared in one of the articles I read this morning, and it was about this. He was talking about peacekeeping and how sometimes if we have like a little contention going on with somebody, that you can have, sometimes we want to avoid that person, and so but if you're, reaching out and I'm going to take them to lunch but if you go to the lunch and then you like totally avoid that conversation the whole time, he said that's not peacemaking. That's
Right.
basically just avoiding the real issue. And so I think that's important. I know that's for me, that was a really big eye-opening thing to understand that it's because I often try to, you know, tiptoe around the issue sometimes just to keep the peace, but that's really not taking care of the problem.
Right. I think that's it's kind of, we think it's the easy way out, but really it's not.
Mhm.
It doesn't work us toward unity. It can prolong those problems.
Yes, yes. And it causes bitterness and resentment in your heart when
It really
things
does.
just aren't resolved.
Hmm. It really does. Interesting. Yeah.
So I think this has been good for me to to see the difference.
Hmm.
Because you can say I'm being a great peacemaker, but really what's going on is I'm trying to hide in the corner.
Well, and you know what's going on in my head, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, is you're having that conversation with that person in your head. You're having,
Mm,
sometimes you're
mhm.
having maybe, well, I should say this, but then she's going to say that. And if she says that, then I'm going to say, like I just create this whole story sometimes. And really it may not be the actual response that you would get. So I feel like it's so much easier just to approach that person. And I mean, it's not
Mhm.
easy, but instead of creating your own stories in your head about how
Yes.
they're going to respond, maybe.
Yeah. But I think when I've had those situations, when I've had those conversations, it's been really important to pray and
Yes.
help me, pray and ask for help to
Yeah.
help me guide me through that conversation. And
Yeah.
like you said, if things kind of get, that tensions rise and those things, because conflict's going to be there, and there's a reason that there's a conflict there. And so, but to be able to do so with Christ, to have Him help you and guide you through that conversation, and um, I think there have been many conversations that I've had like this where it actually turned out really well.
Hmm.
We may not have come to full agreement at the end, but all of the bad feelings were taken care of. And,
Yeah.
eventually things kind of came together later on. But um, I'm grateful that the Lord guided me through those conversations. And I've had
Yeah.
lots of them that weren't so great either.
Yeah, I think we get a best of both, right?
Right.
I was thinking about the people that I really appreciate are those who can bring a sense of humor to it.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be a serious conversation. I mean, it can be, but I feel like for me that just kind of puts me at ease to know that okay, this person, can be lighthearted. I really appreciate just being able to kind of laugh a little bit at that, at
Hmm.
maybe some things that have happened or been said, and um, I don't know that I'm real great about that, but that is something that people who can do that, I feel so appreciative of that they can handle it in that situation.
Yeah, kind of break the ice a little
It
bit.
does break the ice a lot.
Yeah.
In a, especially I think being a recovering perfectionist, where that can feel really intimidating to
Hmm.
recognize, oh, I have this, confrontation, um,
Hmm.
that can be kind of challenging.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, also because you want it to go perfectly and you want it to go right and you want everything, you know? And so it's
Exactly.
sometimes, and that would, for me, that would just, I would just avoid the conversation at all. Because
Yeah.
I
Well,
didn't,
and we've talked about this recently a lot too, is how, so many people I see are just, I'm just going to cut them out of my life. Maybe
mhm,
they've just had one thing and they're like, nope, I can't deal with that. And I think it's learning to say, maybe I can. If I include God in this conversation, if I include him in this situation, we can see totally different outcomes than maybe what if we didn't include him in that. And so I think
mhm.
that's very important too.
But, and I think it going back to all the things that we've talked about and even the last year, the being, showing compassion, self-compassion, the things we've been talking about the last several weeks about, um, walking with someone, story stewardship, all these different things really come into play in these conversations, in these situations.
Absolutely. That learning to listen
Hmm.
and understanding the other person. Yeah. It's just kind of all these things rolled into one.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great that we can know so much about these things nowadays, that we have access to this help. We
Hmm.
can I think it deepens my understanding of when I read through the general conference talks, I can take that to a deeper level and
Hmm.
really strive to apply that in my life.
Yeah, when we were talking about this yesterday, I think I don't remember where you saw that or where you saw this, but you said something about um, in the Beatitudes it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, not the
Yes,
peacekeepers."
not the peacekeepers. That's right. So don't be a peacekeeper. We don't want that. We want to be
Right.
peacemakers.
Exactly. And it's been so wonderful to read these things and to study this a little bit more because when you hear it in a conference talk or different things, I don't know, I don't think, yeah, I guess I felt like I had a good idea of what that was, but I don't think I did.
I never saw the connections before. I think that's what
Yeah.
this has helped me to do, is see those connections between
Hmm.
the forgiveness, the self-compassion, the charity, and the communication, and all of those things that we've talked about in our previous podcasts. It really kind of rolls all of that together in one. And so I do
Hmm.
appreciate that we have taken this journey and compared these words together. These have been some of my favorite episodes of when we take two words that are similar and compare them and
Hmm.
see how we are applying them in our lives and what we need to learn and understand better.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
I'm sure we'll talk about this more.
yes, it's going to come up again, I'm sure. Well, let's come up with an invitation for our listeners. Um, I just think, where in your life are you choosing to be a peacemaker
Hmm. Or
and
avoiding to be a peacemaker.
avoiding to be a peacemaker? Yeah, what's something that you can do better to be a better peacemaker?
There's something for President Nelson I want to find because I think this goes exactly along with this. So he says, I hope that you will look deeply into your heart and see if there are shards of pride or jealousy that prevent you from becoming a peacemaker. So
Mm,
really looking inside your heart and seeing where are you be like that young man in that example earlier, are you the one that's causing the contention because of the jealousies and the pride in your heart? So
mm,
yeah,
I like that. Well, thank you, Melissa. I have really enjoyed this.
it's been wonderful. Thank you. Join us for our next episode as we discuss tools for conflict resolution, including how to approach difficult conversations and ways to choose curiosity and peace. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow or share with others so we are easier to find. Check out our show notes for each episode in your podcast app or YouTube, and join us on Instagram for more daily content at Awakenings Podcast.